This is SD Hudson Magic. Welcome to the 6th episode in my first ever romantic sleep story. When we last saw Rebecca Tregoran, she was walking away from the one thing she wanted more than anything else in the world. The director of Scott Lake Industries, Jake Fairmore. He, meanwhile, was having a hard time coming to terms with some devastating news he had learned on a recent trip to New Delhi. But before we begin, let's take a moment to focus on where we are now. It is time to relax and fully let go. Take a deep breath in through your nose. That's it. Then let it out on a long sigh. Relax as you sink into the support beneath you. And let the cares of the day slip away. Feel the muscles in your face relax. Allow your shoulders to melt away from your ears. And watch your thoughts and worries float into the space around you. This is your time. And here we are, back again in Rebecca's apartment, where she has just finished her piano lesson with Ahmed, the little boy next door. "That's perfect," she said, as his fingers released their grip on the ivory keys. "I'm very proud of you, and Mummy will be too when she sees your performance tomorrow." Ahmed beamed. He liked the lady next door. She was always ready to take over, even when Mummy was working the night shift. "But what about my suit?" he panicked. "Don't worry, Ahmed, it's all sorted," Rebecca reassured him. "I've spoken to church, and it's all there waiting for you. Your Mummy's going to have the surprise of her life." "This is going to be epic," said Ahmed. "Yes. Now let's pack away. Mummy will be here soon and you need to be ready." No sooner had she said it than a knock came at the door. "Mummy, we've got a surprise for you," Ahmed beamed as he rushed at his mother, his arms outstretched. "A surprise for me?" she exclaimed. "Yes," said Rebecca. "It's tomorrow night at the church. Is that okay? Ahmed's been practicing very hard." Anika pulled Ahmed in close to her hospital uniform. "Of course, I can't wait." Then they left, taking a loaf of freshly baked bread with them. Rebecca sat back on her sofa and pulled her chenille blanket in tight. She said to herself, "This is it. Another Friday night." It had been a troubling week for her, avoiding Jake Fairmore and the many magazines littered on every available surface in the office. There was no getting away from the front cover, where Jake and Olivia looked very much a couple. She looked around her apartment. Weren't other people her age out setting the world alight? Not her, though. Not tonight. It was time for a phone call to Mum, and then her new book. It wasn't as if she had no options. Hadn't that chap at church made a beeline for her every time she walked in? He was certainly a catch. Maybe she should take him up on his offer. That would help to take Jake off her mind. Yes, she'd speak to him tomorrow at the performance. It was about time she did something decisive. She reached for the phone, then noticed the package that had been dropped off earlier. It was covered in foreign stamps, and the packing was smudged where it had been repeatedly franked. She jumped up and went next door. "This came for you," she said when Anika answered. "Oh, no problem," said Anika. "Ahmed wanted to show you his helicopter anyway." So Rebecca followed her in to their brightly lit living room. Across the walls hung embroidered scenes with opulent threads stitched lovingly, and scattered across the coffee table, Ahmed's artwork showed much promise. She picked her way through the foam arrows from his latest set that were littered all over the pale carpet, and sat down on the sofa. This was a busy home and a happy one where a child could freely express himself. Anika opened the package and handed her the letter inside. "We've come a long way since those days," Anika said to Rebecca. But Rebecca could see the scars ran deep. She began to read all about how Anika and Ahmed had been rescued from a gang in London, where they had been forced to work as part of an immigration package offered to them from a very disreputable employer. Having lived in nothing more than a hovel, with Ahmed working at least 12 hours a day, their lives had been unbearable. And it was only when by some fluke one day a knock came at the door that they were rescued and sent by a charity to Scotland to recuperate and to start a new life for themselves. Rebecca could hardly believe it. "I had no idea you had been through so much. You should be very proud of yourselves. You're a fantastic mother. You only have to look at Ahmed to see that." They sat down together and spent the rest of the evening talking. And that night they became close friends. The next evening rolled in pleasantly enough, and Rebecca made plans for what promised to be a great night. Tonight was the night when all local children could showcase their talent and hopefully receive a place at Scotland Music School if they were good enough. She had high hopes for Ahmed. He had learned so much in her piano lessons, and if anyone deserved a chance, he did, especially after what he had been through. She looked through her wardrobe. Okay, so she couldn't afford the fancy clothes Olivia Cartwright wore, but she could still turn heads as she had a good eye for the right cut and the most flattering fabrics. Yes, the royal blue would do, with matching stilettos. This may only be the church, but it was Saturday night, and that was reason enough to look her best. Doubtless Jake Fairmore would be dining in some expensive restaurant with the local hoi polloi, but she had better things to do. If nothing else, she was true to herself, and she wouldn't be compromising her morals for money any time soon. The sooner she left Scott Lake Industries, the better. She could suffer their double standards no more, and had already asked Sam to get her another job. She checked her reflection in the mirror and noted the serious look on her face. Speaking to Anika the night before, she knew it was more than a coincidence that Scott Lake Industries was being investigated for child exploitation. And here, right next door to her, was an example of just that. We thought we were very lucky to have had our visas funded through a work scheme we were told about in India, Anika had said. Because I'd recently became a widow, we were eligible. And I thought I had nothing to lose. When we were in London, we were sharing with 3 other families, with 1 toilet and bath, and the water was turned off sometimes, so we didn't even have that. It seemed as though Scott Lake Industries had their name plastered all over it. How could they? How could Jake? Rebecca didn't have the heart to speak to Anika about what she knew. But ever since she read the letter, she made up her mind she couldn't let this happen again. But enough of this negativity now. She picked her best gold earrings from her jewellery box and put on her matching bracelet, her favourite bracelet, the one her father had gifted her when she turned 21. And now for the lipstick. Pillar box red, I think. Why not? She said to herself. Yes, you'll do. And grabbing her old checked coat, she called Ahmed away from the television. When Mummy walks into the church, she said, and sees you all dressed up, she'll be so proud. Let's get there quickly and get you changed, little man. They arrived at the church just in time. Behind them, fractious parents were queuing, eager to bag the best parking spots. But when Rebecca escorted Ahmed up the pathway, all their eyes were upon her. Especially those of the local GP, Paul Jacobs. Hi Paul, all set? Rebecca asked as she took off her coat. There's seats at the front if you're quick, he offered. And Rebecca took his advice whilst Ahmed was ushered away with the rest of the performers to get changed. An hour later, everybody agreed the performance was a resounding success. Anika Singh had been overwhelmed with her son's progress and even more astounded when Ahmed was awarded a place at Scott Lake Music School. Holding his certificate and waving goodbye to the other children, he looked tired. I'll get a taxi, said Rebecca, and made her way out with Paul hot on her tail. I've got to say, you look fantastic tonight, he gushed as he handed her her coat. And following her out, he waited with her at the curb. The road glistened with a recent rainfall, reflecting the warm glow from the street lamps above. It would have been the perfect moment for Paul to suggest a date. But in a sudden panic, Rebecca blurted out, I think I've left my scarf on my chair. She had to stop this before it started. Leading men on was not her style. And Paul seemed like a nice guy. He left promptly. With any luck, their parting would be short and sweet. And she stepped forward, right to the edge of the curb. The driving drizzle was making it difficult for her to see ahead. Then all at once, a sleek black car careered headlong into a large murky puddle sitting deep in the road. Watch it, she screamed, her temper burning her red hair as it covered her in dirty black water. She jumped into the road and ran after the offending vehicle. Stilettos or not, she wasn't going to let them get away with it that easily. But she needn't have bothered, for the large black car ground to a sudden halt. Why don't you look where you're going?" she screamed again, both upset and angry at the same time. And no sooner had she said it than the driver's door opened. She looked down at the murky stain that was once her favourite dress. Whoever that driver was, they would get a piece of her mind. But to her dismay, a sleek suit and a shiny pair of shoes emerged, carrying a large black umbrella. "And I thought you were ignoring me." Rebecca froze. Really? This? After all that's happened, I have to put up with this? She pushed the matted hair from her face and straightened the collar of her cheap overcoat. Then, taking one determined step forward, she lifted her head high and snapped. "And that's the best you've got after a whole month? Humiliation. It seems I was wrong about you, Jake Fairmore. You're just as inadequate as you always were." And turning on her heel, she faced the church steps and Paul, who was standing there, his hands empty. But Jake was not going to let her get away that easily. He grabbed hold of her wrist. "Oh, no you don't, Rebecca Tregoran." "Get off me, Jake." "Oh, you'll do what?" "Get off me or I'll scream." "Rebecca Tregoran, the last thing you'll do in a public place is scream." As soon as the words came out, Jake knew what he said was ridiculous. Once Rebecca had put her mind to something, she would go with it, no matter what. So he let go. "Just let me speak to you, please." Rebecca turned to face him, the rain trickling down her cheeks, her light eyes brighter than they had ever been. And sensing an impasse, Jake held his large umbrella over her head. As much as she hated herself for it, she needed to hear what he had to say. There had to be an explanation for why he had ignored her. "Go on then. Say what you've got to say." Jake shook his head in disbelief. "We're standing in the middle of the road, Rebecca, please. Just get in the car." The penetrating rain beat down upon them as the cars drove past, each one's occupants eager for the story behind the spectacle. Had she walked out on him, or had he told her to leave? Either way, here were two very nice-looking, very wet people standing in the middle of a road, having a passionate exchange. Rebecca refused to move. The last thing she wanted was Jake coming to the rescue again. Her days of being the simpering, lovelorn sap were well and truly over. She wanted answers. That was all. And gazing into her eyes, Jake knew once again he was beaten. Rebecca Tregoran would not be getting into his car. She would not be pulled into his arms, and she would not be giving him anything he was so desperate for, unless he told her the truth. Rebecca was furious, and looking into his eyes, she refused to acknowledge the desperation sitting there. "I'm waiting. Why don't you tell me about how you recruited child labour on your recent trip to India? Or how about you can't keep your hands off Olivia Cartwright?" The charges were damning. There was no getting away from it. But Jake was determined. "I'm sorry, Rebecca." "Sorry? That's the best you've got?" she said. "I'm sorry for letting you down. It all got a bit on top of me and I didn't know what to do. I've had some very bad news, you see. It's old man Cartwright." "And?" Jake clenched his fists. Knowing the truth and putting it into words were two completely different things. But there was no way out now. Standing in front of him, in a bedraggled, weather-worn mess, was the one person he did not want to lie to. "He's my father, Rebecca. Old man Cartwright is my biological father." I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please consider following me for more. Or alternatively, you could leave a donation or even a review. These enable me to carry on the hard work that goes into creating these stories just for you.